and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Evan Lutz of Hungry Harvest. Evan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Cameron. Really appreciate it.
Of course. So, I'd like to start out with your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
I grew up in Baltimore, just outside of Baltimore in a suburb called Pikesville. My childhood was very fun, I would say. I did a lot of outdoor activities. I liked to I liked to always like go hiking and go canoeing and kayaking. Like camp was a really big thing
Mm,
when I was growing up. And I grew up with this idea of sort of repairing the world, of making the world a better place than I found it. Just like you would leave somebody's house, leave if you were a guest at somebody's house, you try to leave it better than when you found it,
mhm.
right? And so that idea was kind of instilled in me by my parents and sort of by my community, and I like to think that that inspired some of what we do at Hungry Harvest.
Mm, incredible. So, what did you or your parents do growing up, and kind of what were some of your aspirations, especially during those younger years? I'm curious, were you involved with sports, or what was that like?
Yeah, I was always a runner.
Mhm.
So I ran a lot of track and cross country, but I was a very active kid. I was always playing in the neighborhoods, football, basketball, any sport. Was sort of my I couldn't stop running around. I was like an energizer buddy when I was a kid.
Mm,
Um, but we did a lot of volunteering and volunteer trips, and I think we grew up. I don't think we were uh, wealthy by any means, but we certainly had food on the table every single night,
mm,
and that was very privileged, and that was sort of that that perspective was taught to us, was not to take things for granted, to understand that there are others not they're not as fortunate, and that we've got to kind of um, work to feed yourself and feed your family, and that was like a very big principle when I was growing up.
mm.
So I would say there was a big component of like giving back to the community that was a central part to my later childhood or early adolescent years.
Mm, for sure. So, for college, then, where did you end up studying, and then what did you study there, and kind of why? What were some of those aspirations leading there?
So I went to the University of Maryland. You can see a map of the Maryland, state of Maryland behind me. It's
Mhm.
where both my parents went there, my aunts and uncles went there, even my grandma graduated there in
Wow.
1953. It's where I met my wife. 11 members of my family went to University of Maryland.
Wow.
I studied business there,
Okay.
primarily because I've always been fascinated by entrepreneurship, and
Mhm.
particularly this idea of combining social value with entrepreneurship,
Mm,
so that the more profits or revenues or growth you have using those same levers, also the more impact you could create, right? Whatever
mm.
that impact might be.
Yeah.
I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I just knew that something involving social value and business. At
Mm,
first, I wanted to do corporate social responsibility.
yeah.
I looked into nonprofits. I looked into a lot of different forms of volunteering. I ultimately decided, through learning in business school, that the best way to create more impact is by scaling a business.
Yeah.
Right. So I studied business. I studied general business. Didn't have any really subspecialties. So I took a few finance courses, accounting, operations, supply chain, marketing. And so there were a number of different. I sort of got the overview of every major component of business, but didn't really do a deep dive into one particular thing like a lot of my friends or colleagues do. And that
Yeah.
was somewhat intentional, right? I didn't really know what particular area of business that I wanted to go into, and so I wanted
Yeah.
more of a broader overview. But I really enjoyed my time at Maryland.
Mm,
I was 4 of the best years of my life. It was great.
certainly. So, following graduation, then, and prior to Hungry Harvest, what kind of jobs were you working? I saw you kind of got into marketing, some operations side. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I actually started Hungry Harvest when I was in college.
Really? Okay.
I had worked a couple internships through college. I worked for Under Armour as an events intern. I'd worked for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation
Mm,
as sort of a research intern, and I had worked on a political campaign as well. That was going from high school to college.
uh-huh.
So I'd only worked, and I did, as a kid, odd jobs like caddying and cutting grass and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of business experience, I really didn't have any when I
Wow.
started Hungry Harvest. I learned about a farmer who had surplus produce on his
Mm,
field, and he had trouble selling that produce. I went out to his farm to see these half green, half red peppers and these eggplants with funny limbs and these oranges that had funny scars on the outside that were half green. And so I saw there was a business opportunity here because he was going to, let it go to waste. I bought it for pennies on the dollar and then sold it for a margin to students at the University of Maryland.
mm,
Set up a little farm stand outside of our student union. By the end of the semester, I had like 500 customers a week.
wow.
I never thought it was really going to take off, but it did. There was a really big market for this at Maryland. And when I was doing this pilot program for Hungry Harvest, this was back in 2013,
Yep.
I did some research and realized that there's about 40% of everything we grow in the United States ultimately goes to waste.
Mm,
20 billion pounds of produce go to waste every single year. There's a
mm,
huge market for the arbitrage of
yeah.
this produce, of turning it into value-added goods or turning it into revenue streams. And so I decided to say, screw it, I'll just give it a try. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was lucky enough to be able to live at home for a couple of years after college,
Yeah.
so I didn't have to deal with expenses of rent. I also didn't have a family to pay for. My car was my grandfather's hand-me-down, so I didn't
Yeah.
have a ton of expenses, which is a great time to start a business, right? When you don't have a ton of experience, don't have a ton of expenses, and you can just kind of be very I'm not very risk averse, right? I enjoy taking risks and
Yeah.
wanted to at least experiment with things post college. So that's when I kind of started this entrepreneurial journey.
It's incredible. So you built this internal customer base through the university. I'm curious from there, where did you plan to expand? Where did you end up selling once you graduated? How long did you stay within this Maryland kind of customer base? Going from there.
Yeah. So I did something actually very smart when I was starting this, which I didn't realize was smart until later. I clicked at everybody's email addresses that bought from our little farm stand, which we didn't use really when we were operating farm stand. Farm stand kind of markets itself
Mhm.
in foot traffic place like a college campus.
Yeah.
But post that farm stand, we turned it into a home delivery service. And I used that email list as our first kind of marketing contacts.
Wow.
We didn't really have a great product at first. It was a 10-week subscription of either two sizes of fruits and vegetables that were basically in a bag.
Mm.
And we didn't even have labels on the bag. So sometimes we would mix up like the two different sizes. The only way you could tell the difference was the weight of the bag, right?
Yeah.
And so we weren't really great at what we were doing at when we were starting. But one thing I will say that has helped us today, which is we really got our pitch down. We knocked on a lot of different doors. I went to that was how we first got our customers. Our initial customers was knocking on doors in
Mm.
Tacoma Park, which is a sort of a suburb of DC.
Got it.
And then I went to probably like 4 events per week, either tabling or networking or just trying to put our name out there so that
Yep.
people can find out what we're doing and then get people to sign up on our website.
Mm.
This was a time in business also when you didn't need a lot of capital to start a business. There were
Yeah.
independent contractors just becoming a thing with Uber. You didn't have to buy an expensive warehouse or refrigerated truck. Like we could outsource
Yeah.
our operations to a farm, right, or go to their farm and kind of do our packing and picking there.
Yeah.
And so we kind of we bootstrapped it at first, and it didn't take a lot of capital to actually start this business. And
Mm.
then eventually we just became sales and revenue driven through the next 4 or 5 years.
Wow. Incredible. So what does scaling look like on the side of um, resources? So you started from this one farm, and then from there, where do you end up going? Especially once you start expanding outside of Maryland, you began going more national. Do you partner with other farmers? What does that look like, and how does that roadmap work?
When we were first starting, it was a chicken and egg problem. In order for us to buy from more farms, we needed to have volume. Because
Mm.
farmers won't just sell, one case of apples. You need to order a few pallets, a truckload.
Yeah.
At the same time, we needed to get demands, right? In order to fulfill the supply. So it was kind of a dual stream. We kind of built both sides up together.
Mhm.
We did go to a number of different farming conferences at first and told people about us, and then basically got our name out there to a lot of different farmers. And once we got the demand side up, that's when we gave those farmers a call, and we were ultimately able to make relationships with actually the first farmer we ever bought from the College Park Farmers Market. We still buy from him today, which is
Wow.
pretty funny, just in a much greater volume today.
Yeah.
So we did a lot uh, of grinding, of basically balancing to try and get that demand and the supply side up at the same time, which is very, very tricky. If you're starting a business,
Yeah,
you always want your supply to be steady. Ours was certainly not at first.
for sure. So what at the team size then, going from year 1 to 2 to 3, what did the team size look like at launch? And then what were those first kind of crucial hires, especially for scaling for Hungry Harvest?
Yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing when I started out. I admit that I've said that I think two times already on
Yeah.
this episode. And so I didn't know what I was looking for in terms of team as well. Our team actually transitioned basically completely over the first year
Mm.
from 2014 to 2015. And we only had a few people. Most of our folks were either interns or customer experience. They were working on getting marketing or coordinating drivers or doing operations and procurement.
Mhm.
Eventually, we moved to a team that we've largely stuck with. A lot of folks that were on call it our second tier team or our V2 team
Mhm.
in later 2015, 2016 are still with us today, 7, 8 years later.
Mm.
And so the team is 85 folks today. When we were on I guess a turning point for the business was Shark Tank airing in
Yeah.
early 2016. At that point in time, we were 7 people, 4 full-time, 3 part-time.
Yep.
We had one person doing all the operations and procurement, one doing overseeing all supply chain, one doing just drivers, and then a couple doing marketing as well.
Got it.
And so today our team is basically split. About 50 folks or so are doing operations, supply chain, warehousing, about 30, and then 30 or more office, and then marketing and sales as well, business development.
Got it. Touching on Shark Tank, you're about 2 years into the business, or you are 2 years into the business at this point. I'm curious, what was that experience like, especially from a consumer food product, which we see a lot of D2C, direct to consumer products, but something so mass as hungry and kind of solving hunger. How did that work on Shark Tank? And what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I never really anticipated going on the show when I had aspirations of becoming an entrepreneur before Hungry Harvest.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I didn't think that they would take like a social enterprise on the show.
Yeah.
They were actually, funny enough, they were actually the ones that reached out to us to encourage us to apply, which we did sort of begrudgingly because we were at a point in time where nobody was getting paid and we were very small. And the application process and timeline takes very long, and it also is not guaranteed, even if you do film to
Yeah.
ever air on the show. So we did this whole process to apply. We ultimately got on the show. I studied very, very hard, watched every single episode of Shark Tank before mine episode aired, wrote down a question, wrote down a response, kind of memorized it, went on the show, and I was very lucky to have a good airing. I sort of nailed my first 90-second pitch. I knew if I was going to memorize that and nail it, then I was going to have a good show. If I knew if I stuttered or slowed down, it was going to be a bad show. Luckily, I did really well. And then the point of the show actually is to make sure you advertise yourself and your business in
Yeah.
a really positive manner, right? People are tuning in to see you as the content, which typically is not, that's not how advertising works. Usually you're interrupting. On Shark Tank, you are the content, right?
Yep.
So we presented super well, did a really great job of preparing for it with the rest of the team, and we aired. I think the show was largely successful. We had about 500 subscribers when we first before we aired. In a couple weeks, that had ballooned to about 3,000. We're able to hire a few more folks, raise a little bit of money,
Wow.
and then momentum just continued to build from there.
So you mentioned around this time you had close to 7 employees. I'm curious, once that episode aired, I hear from a lot of my guests who's also been on Shark Tank. you noticed a spike in sales. How did you manage that inventory in those operations with your team size?
We found out 2 weeks before we were about to air.
Mhm.
It was December 23rd. We were about to take a little break for Christmas and for the holidays because we had been working our butts off all year on trying to make this work.
Yeah.
Instead, we said, cancel that. We all worked extremely, very, very hard for 2 weeks to get more drivers, to get more farmers, to make sure our website wouldn't crash, to setting up an event, like doing all the press release. Actually, our press release was written by one of my friends, right? Like, so we did a lot of different things that were sort of boots on the grounds. Just we had to grind it out. There were a lot of 17-hour days. We didn't take any days off in between
Wow.
when we find out. And then when Shark Tank aired, but little do we know, that was just the beginning, actually. Those 2 weeks were just kind of prep work.
Mhm.
After Shark Tank aired, that's when the real work began. Because
Yeah.
then we had to start recruiting more team members. We had to start raising money. We had to start fulfilling demand for all these customers. There was a lot of work, but it was good work. It was exciting work. I mean, the first year of business, we were sort of grinding out, basically begging people to sign up for our service, right? Trying to get our pitch down and not
Yeah.
getting a lot of customers. So to see a lot of customers coming in and having to fulfill sales is always better than having to go out and get sales, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion.
For sure. So looking at Hungry Harvest today from a consumer's point of view, say someone was going to go on and place an order with Hungry Harvest, how does that process look? What can they expect? And what is the regions that are currently covered as well, roughly?
Yeah, we service basically the Mid-Atlantic from New York down to North Carolina over to sort of middle Pennsylvania and West Virginia, Western Maryland,
Yep.
Virginia regions. And people go online on hungryharvest.net. They can pick what harvest they like based on their household size, based on how often they cook. We have harvests, or mini harvests is good for like, the solo cooker or for somebody who cooks for 1 to 2 people.
Hmm.
They can customize more of what they like. They can add different, we have like 50 different our own branded products on there, tomato basil soup and potato and truffle pierogies that are all made from our produce.
Hmm.
We also have different grocery staples on there like olive oils and rice and pastas and chocolate bars and things like that.
Yep.
And then you choose your delivery frequency. It can come once a week, can come every other week. We have a never list. So if there's things you absolutely don't like, if you don't like kale, we'll make sure never to include that in your box. And then your delivery will come a few days later. So it's a pretty easy, straightforward process that we've got going on.
Amazing. So do you sell one-off products as well, or are they mostly those variety boxes? And if so, what would you say is the best seller overall of your SKUs?
Our best seller is probably our mid-sized harvest. It's called the full harvest.
Yeah.
That people customize and add. So my personal favorite, also our best seller in terms of branded products, is our apple cider and our dried mango. Both are
Mm.
really, really good. I am
Yeah.
a sucker for Trader Joe's dried mango.
Yeah.
And I was like basically addicted to it until we came out with our dried mango. And I swear our dried mango competes or is better. It
Mm.
is really, really good. It is. I order a few different packs every single week. We also have our R&D team, our branded products team, does a really good job at innovating. So we're coming out with new products basically a handful of new products every month.
Mm.
And so I always love trying our product. That's actually my favorite part of my job, is getting to, we call them sample parties, where we'll go to the warehouse and like sample the next
Oh, that's
iteration
awesome.
of branded products. But yeah, our full harvest or mid-size harvest is probably our most popular product. And then people average ordering probably 5 or 6 different grocery items in addition to the produce that comes in there.
Mhm. Incredible. Looking ahead to the future for Hungry Harvest, do you focus on staying, or what is the projected on the East Coast, or do you see West Coast, Midwest? What does that look like, if you could share?
Yeah, I think we're really gonna stick on the East Coast,
Yeah.
at least for the next few years. I think there's economies of scale to be had here.
For
We
sure.
we did attempt to a scale beyond the East Coast in years past. We were in Detroit previously. We were in a couple other cities.
Mhm.
It was very hard on the supply chain to expand to those other cities.
Yeah.
So I think we basically shrunk down. We're just in the Mid-Atlantic. We're going to expand region by region, basically in proximity to where we are today. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the next iteration of Hungry Harvest. I
Yep.
will say that's just for our consumer products. We also have expanded into a few different other lines of business. We
Mm.
also do food as medicine, where we will do contracts with hospitals, with insurance companies, with food banks, to basically provide their clientele or their patients with
Mm.
produce prescriptions. That has
Wow.
really taken off over the past 5 years. And then we do wholesale produce as well. So we sell to restaurants, commissaries, food banks, food processors, other wholesalers as well. So we have our hands on a lot of really high quality, affordable and cheap produce, and we can pass on
Incredible.
a lot of those savings, in bulk to a lot of different food companies. So we've expanded into a few different lines of business,
Yeah.
and we're excited to kind of keep expanding those lines of business as well.
I love it. So I like to conclude each episode with this. If you could share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
I think something I've learned is everything is an experiment and a problem to be solved. The entire entrepreneurial journey, from ideation to when you either close down or sell your business or exit your business, whatever it might be, that whole thing is an experiment and a journey. You never know when you're going to fail. You never know when you're going to succeed. The only thing you can do is continue to try and problem solve and continue. And the key phrase there is continue to try.
Yeah.
Right? That is the biggest thing. Too many entrepreneurs give up way too early. Some entrepreneurs don't know when to give up, actually, which is the flip side of that problem. But
Yeah.
I do think experimentation is a really big thing.
Mm.
And the other thing I've learned, one of the biggest regrets I had was not focusing on our culture, our team early in the business. I
Mm.
should have done that from day one instead of did that from like year two.
Yeah.
And so I think we could have avoided a lot of pitfalls had I
Mhm.
started on that from day one.
For sure. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining me today. And to
Yeah.
the listeners out there, make sure to check out Hungry Harvest at hungryharvest.net.